Hi everyone, I'm Sayanti, the artist behind Sayanti Fine Arts. On August 29th, I did a live stream informing you about an oil pastel challenge for the month of August. The whole idea is to take your favorite painting in any medium or your favorite art style or your favorite artist once again in any particular medium, and then go ahead and create a painting inspired by that. You could go ahead and recreate a painting of the exactly the same way like the original painting was, or you can get just the inspiration or just take the painting style and use it for your own painting. The only thing, it is an oil pastel challenge, so you have to do the final painting with oil pastels as your medium. So this is my first one of that oil pastel challenge. So what I did is I took Monet's Lady with the Parasol as my painting of inspiration. I did a little study of that first and then came up with my own painting, a version of the lady with oil pastels, lady with parasol. It is of course not the same painting, but this is where I drew my inspiration from. So let's see how I did what I did.
As you all know that my preferred style is realism, so I'm not very attuned to impressionistic styles or how techniques rather. So what I did was initially I just took a piece of construction paper and tried to imitate the lady with the parasol painting by Monet on that piece of construction paper with my oil pastels. I was being very sketchy because this was not my final painting. This was just that's just an attempt to understand what techniques and style Monet may have used and how to use the colors to give that impressionistic feel, because I have a tendency to blend everything, smooth down everything, and impressionism is just the opposite. You need to keep the paints kind of the loose feel and have an impression of the whole look, play with the lights and shadows and the impression of objects more than the fine details. In fact, you have to move away from fine details, which is generally my natural instinct with any kind of paintings, whatever medium I'm working on. So I wanted to do a little study first before I delved onto my actual project. Once I did this little study, I was much more confident to do my own project. So I delved onto my Lady by the Sea or Lady by the Sea painting for this oil pastel challenge. This is going to be my first painting. Now you will notice that at the very beginning of the painting, when I'm laying down the oil pastel pigment on the paper, initially what I did was I was thinking that okay, I am painting impressionistic style, so I don't need to blend anything at all. So I was just laying color on top of color and just letting it be like that. But then I realized that doing this, what is happening is that unless I blend a little bit of the first layer of pigments or colors, the coverage is not really right. I'm not getting a nice coverage on my surface of the paper. So a lot of the background and the actual paper is peeking through. A little bit is fine. That would actually give a lot of texture and add on much value to the impressionistic look. But if I have no pigment at all, just laying color on top of color is not going to produce the desired result that I'm looking for. So then you will see that throughout the entire painting, whenever I'm going for the first layer of paint, I'm putting down some amount of pigment and then I'm blending it out, so letting the pigments enter the crevices, nook and crevices of the paper and get good coverage on the surface of the paper. Once I'm getting good coverage, then I'm not trying to blend anything at all and straight away going with the light, playing with the different colors and lights and darks and just creating highlights and hyping up the contrast to create the impressionistic look. So this is what my main learning is from this first painting project for this oil pastel challenge. I learned so much about impressionistic style. It's not that you're not going to cover the surface of the paper or canvas or whatever surface you're working on. You will cover it entirely with whatever medium you're working on. But what it gives that impressionistic look is that you are not going to go for the fine details and instead go for bigger impressions of lights and darks. Play with the contrast, put where the lights are light or darks are dark, put the right colors and play with the contrast and create the values by impressions and not by fine details. Values are very, very important in impressionistic style of paintings. If your darks and lights are not correct, and if you do not have enough highlights, or if your highlights are too much, then the painting will lose its value. The same thing you will see throughout the time I'm painting the sea. I'm laying down a lot of pigment and blending it out first and smoothing it down first. But then after the initial layer has been laid down, what I'm doing is I'm adding lots of chunky paint here and there and letting it show through. I'm not blending all the paint into one another and washing out everything to get one smooth, one single color. What I'm trying to do is leave a lot of the chunky oil pastels. And what I also learned is that oil pastels and impressionism are probably made for each other. It works so very well together, and I got so inspired by it that I'm obviously going to do much more of impressionistic style with my oil pastels, although my first love is realism, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to delve into this beautiful concept of impressionism that I have learned through this process. Now onto the rocks. I am first laying down some browns and blues, some amount of purples, dark and light browns, and creating the lights and shadows. After I laid down the very dark colors, then I'm coming back with grays and lighter purples and lighter browns, and even some amount of yellow ochre to create the lighter areas. And finally, I'll add some of the highlights. Now on to the main figure. I'm creating first the shadows with purples, blues, and very dark brown. In the hair, I'm using quite a bit of black as well. But in the other areas for shadows, I'm mainly depending on blues and purples. And I have a tendency that I prefer purples rather than blues in my shadow areas. So I used a lot of purples mixed with the blues. And wherever I wanted a more smooth gradient, a smooth transition, I added a lot of grays in between the blues and purples and the very light colors to kind of go gradually from light to dark or dark to light. And you can see that in first again when I'm laying down pigment, I'm smoothing it down a little bit so that I get good coverage on top of the paper. But once the coverage is achieved, I am just leaving my paint chunky and not going into fine details. Same onto the surface of the dress that this lady is wearing. If I was working in realistic style, I would probably try to add each little detail and try to paint out the small flowers or designs and patterns on the dress. But the lovely thing about impressionism is you have to get the impression of the designs and the patterns, not the individual details. And that sometimes creates such a beautiful impression. And I just fell in love with impressionism more now that I have tried it myself in such a great extent. I have done a Dali painting before in Van Gogh style, but that was just one small painting. I have not gone into so much depth and details and tried it so vastly. And the more I'm trying it, the more I'm falling in love with Impressionism. Yes, I always love to see Impressionistic painting. Now I even love to create them. So I think that's my biggest achievement or biggest learning or biggest gain through this particular project. I have found a new style, a new way to work with my oil pastels and probably with other medium as well, but that I'll have to try. But with oil pastels, I definitely think impressionism and oil pastels just go hand in hand very well together. Onto some of the smaller areas, just like this book, it was a little bit hard to create the fine details, but then I continuously had to remind myself that this is impressionism. I do not need to get the fine details. Everything does not need to look perfect. I just need it to look like the impression of a book, impression of a rock, impression of a clothes, dress, folds. Everything has to be just a play of colors, lights and darks, and you have to just get the feel of the object, not the fine details. And once I reminded myself of that, everything became so much easier and much more free flowing. I hope you learned a trick or two about Impressionism from this painting. Let me know in your comments how you liked my painting and my first production of this oil pastel challenge. And if you want to know more about this oil pastel challenge, definitely look into my live stream informational uh, video on 30, 30th, no, I'm sorry, 29th of July. And you can find all the information about this particular challenge that I am participating in, and you are most welcome to participate in too as well. So that's my first painting for the oil pastel challenge. Let me know your thoughts, and do not forget to give me a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button to keep in touch. Thank you.